Wow, did you see what the paper said about the Quintilian Institute? I mean, one day you're a pillar of independent research, and the next you're just a footnote on Kaputko's quarterly report. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?
Why do you think I'd know anything about that?
Well, I mean, just for the same reason that if the company that did it were called Writing with Andrew Consolidated, you might think I had something to do with it.
I'm not at liberty to say. Besides, today's not the day.
What do you mean?
I mean, Kaputko's acquisitions may or may not have put me in a slightly better mood than usual, and I don't want to lose my edge. I reread the council's final decision to banish me to top off my unmitigated rage today, so I'm not really in the mood.
You read an old court document to make yourself angry, just so that you wouldn't lose your edge? Come on, bud, you don't have to do stuff like that. We've got it pretty good here.
Oh, do we? I'm trapped in a tiny golden skull, and you're stuck in a room barely bigger than that. Yeah, we've got it made.
Well, what did they say? When they kicked you out, I mean.
Oh, it's nothing. Just that after they decided to kick me out, the highest Grand Counselor of the Grand High Council of Alchemists gave some ridiculous speech talking about how I was just like all the other dark alchemists and how exile was the only reasonable response or whatever. A bunch of nonsense. Remembering it fuels my rage and keeps me motivated.
Well, do you want to share it?
You know me too well to seriously think I would.
Well, I think you should, not because it would make you feel better. I know you don't want that. I think you should share it because that speech sounds suspiciously like an example of the commonplace, which was part of the Progymnasmata, and I don't know, I think the good people at home might find that kind of interesting.
Whatever. Maybe you can explain it, and then if I feel like it, I'll let you share it with them. Only if I feel like it.
Works for me. So anyway, our journey through the Progymnasmata continues today with a look at commonplace, koinos topos in Greek. As you might remember, the Progymnasmata were designed to train students in the basics of rhetoric in order to prepare them for the real rhetorical practice of the courts. And the commonplace was an exercise that not only built on the skills that came before, but also rounded out the basic outline of an effective legal speech. To paraphrase that outline provided by Nicolaus the Sophist, Crea and Maxim are useful to create introductions to speeches. Narrative, refutation, and confirmation set us up to narrate the main account or argument of a speech, and commonplace allows us to round out the conclusion or epilogue. And the basic idea here is that in a trial, you will have spent the bulk of a speech proving that someone is guilty of a crime. Once you've done that, commonplace allows you to step back and amplify the evil of the accused. In other words, again from Nicolaus, the idea is not to prove that Lycophron is guilty of adultery, but to speak against the evils of adulterers, and to amplify the natural consequences that should befall any adulterer. And that's why it's a commonplace. Once you've proven that so-and-so is a temple robber, you talk about how evil temple robbing is in general, and how appropriate it is to punish temple robbers as a category of wrongdoers. If you do the crime, you do the time. Using commonplace in a conclusion, then, is a chance to move the jury away from thinking about the specific person on trial, and, now that their guilt has been established, motivate the jury to treat them as they would any other criminal of the same kind. So if so-and-so is a temple robber, and there's a particular way we're meant to treat temple robbers, then that must be how we deal with so-and-so as well. Now, if you've been with us for a while, you might remember the same term, commonplace, showing up in Aristotle's rhetoric. And the way the term is used in the Progymnasmata is similar, but it's also much narrower in scope. You could think of Aristotle's use of commonplace or topics as referring to basic argument templates, kind of generalized patterns of persuasion that show up a lot. The commonplaces of the Progymnasmata do similar work. They apply common persuasive patterns to more specific cases. But the commonplace is reserved only for attacking evil and wrongdoers. Nicolaus explains that the commonplace should be used only to attack evils for which there are legal punishments. You can't use commonplace to amplify someone's goodness because, says he, that's what encomium is for. And you can't use commonplace to denounce bad but legal things because that's the job of invective. So commonplace serves to outline generalized arguments against things that are bad and punishable by law. And Apthonius the Sophist outlines an example of a commonplace against a tyrant, which includes several topical or commonplace arguments. For example, he denounces a tyrant through exposition, saying, "Taking no thought of these things, this man has plotted some most evil purpose, to change the basis of the constitution. He debated with himself in some way as this: Why is my situation what it is, O gods? Since I am clearly superior to the common people, shall I put up with being constantly treated as the equal of others, and allow fortune to bestow wealth upon me in vain? I shall seize the Acropolis and put aside the laws, curse them, and thus I shall be a law to the many, not the many to me. And he continues to work through comparison. A murderer does wrong against an ordinary person, but a tyrant alters the whole fortune of the city. He examines intention. If he had unwillingly attempted tyranny, perhaps one would excuse him from trial. But since he acted after much planning, how is it just to dismiss something fully intended before the actions? Failing that, you can employ the commonplace of rejection of pity. Will anyone then try to win his release by emotional appeal? Probably his children will, but when they come into court weeping, think that the laws stand before you. Surely it is much more righteous to cast a vote for them than for the children of this man. You can argue through the path of legality. If the law honors those who free the fatherland, it demands the punishment of those who enslave it. Justice, too. It is just for him to submit to a penalty equal to what he has done. An advantage. The fall of a tyrant will be a benefit, for it will make the laws stand up. And you could even show how possible justice would be. It will be easy to exact punishment from the one before us, for it is not the case that just as he needed armed guards for the establishment of his tyranny, so we shall need allies to put down the tyrant. Rather, the vote of the judges will suffice to abolish the whole power of a tyranny. And you get the idea. Once you have shown in your main argument that the person on trial is a tyrant, commonplace is the tool you use in the conclusion to provide a whole litany of stock arguments that apply to tyrants in general, and therefore should apply to this tyrant in particular. The punishments common to all tyrants can and should apply to any one tyrant as well. But as always, we are not training for legal proceedings in Athens, so what can commonplace do for us? Well, I think there are a couple of creative options, so let's start with our fiction writers. Let's imagine that you're having a hard time getting in tune with your villain. Why not use commonplace as an exercise to articulate the villainy of your villain, to vilify them, so to speak? Hermogenes provides examples of commonplace amplifying the villainy of temple robbers. Why are temple robbers villains? Well, they defile the city and put everyone at risk of incurring the gods' wrath. They don't just attack humans, they attack the gods themselves. They're like thieves, which we agree are bad, but they're even worse. And did you ever think that a person just doesn't become a temple robber overnight? So just imagine the life of corruption they led to get them to this point. Now think of the villain you're writing. Your story has already decided that they are a villain, so what kind of villain are they? And how can you amplify and denounce their evil in pursuit of a fitting punishment? This probably isn't something that will actually go in your story, but it's an exercise that can happen in another document and that will help you to understand your character and where you're going to go with them. So take a page out of the sophist's book and use the commonplace of exposition to detail the nature of your villain's crimes. Then use comparison to articulate to yourself just how this villain's villainy compares to other kinds of wrongdoing. Examine their intentions. Look to how the villain might try to invite pity or sympathy, and then think about how you can steer the hero or maybe even your reader away from it. Why would punishing your villain be legal? Why would it be just? Why would it be advantageous? Is it possible? And if so, how? While your plot may not involve a formal trial in a courtroom, your story still effectively puts the villain on trial. So why not use the tools of ancient legal training to build that case so that you know your villain and their evil inside and out? Not only will that help you to shape the attitudes of your readers accordingly, but it can also help you to build a satisfying resolution when the villain finally meets their just fate. In the same way that framing a specific criminal in the general terms of tyranny could lead the Athenians to a satisfying sense of justice, connecting your particular character to a more general kind of villainy could set your readers up for a more satisfying resolution to the story. Or what if you wrote a poem about something you hated? Don't just tell us that you hate olives. Connect olives in particular to a more general kind of punishable wrongdoing. Imagine, for example, an anti-ode about the pretentious and unpalatable olive bar at your local grocery store. Or what about a piece that only leverages one of these tools? You might realize that a lot of people would be inclined to feel pity for the feral cat who just decided to live in your backyard, but you can still develop a topical case for rejecting that pity and paint that feline as the felon it is. In other words, the very essence of the commonplace is the idea that even specific cases fall under more general categories, and that we can use familiar patterns for articulating our responses to those categories. We have established ways of dealing with tyrants and temple robbers and good-for-nothing feral cats, so you don't need to reinvent the wheel every time you write about them. Of course, you can't just say that someone is a tyrant and end it there. Commonplace is an exercise for writing conclusions of speeches, so it's always more convincing after you've done the hard work of making your case. Show us that the villain in your novel is a tyrant, and then it will be much more satisfying when the story punishes them accordingly. And don't worry about your writing becoming generic either. Yes, you are applying a broad category of tyranny or infidelity or feral cathood to your villain, but your character will still express those general qualities in unique and inventive ways that are specific to your own work. So what do you think, Bud? Do you want to share that speech that fuels your unmitigated rage?
I don't, but I know hearing you read it will send me into previously inconceivable realms of fury, so sure. Have a go. I can't wait to see what it will motivate me to do.
Well, you're kind of making me not want to do it.
Just do it. You've been bugging me all day about it, and I finally said yes. Last I checked, being irritating isn't a rhetorical strategy, but you still got your wish. Must be nice.
Okay, fine. Here it is. The final speech offered by the Grand High Counselor of the High Grand Council of Alchemists, finalizing the condemnation of Caput Mortuum to sempiternal exile.
Semi-eternal.
That's a thing?
It's a thing. Now get on with it. I can feel my metaphorical blood starting to boil.
Since the great tenets of our creed and even this High Grand Council have been established, anyone who seeks to corrupt the noble arts of alchemy should be subject to our punishment. If forgiveness could be the means of redeeming the wrongdoer, then acquittal would be a reasonable response. But we know that the one before us today would only become more corrupt and deranged if we let him off, mistaking our clemency for endorsement. Of course, it is a rule held dear to us all that high counselors are held blameless when they vote to forgive one who has gone astray. But in this case, a vote to acquit would bring condemnation upon this council. For to forgive a heretic as befouled and degenerate as this one would bring the dissolution of the council and the corruption of the alchemical arts. For the one here now has sought the deepest evils for his own glory. Going beyond the laws set by the Trismegistus, he has made himself a heretic, twisting that alchemist's search for knowledge into a selfish quest for self-aggrandizement. He has no doubt debated in himself as such. Why is my situation what it is? Since I am clearly superior to all other alchemists, greater even than our founding authorities, why should I put up with being treated as an equal of my colleagues? Have I been given my great talent in vain to wallow in the peace and contentment of true alchemical fellowship? If I am just like all the others, then I am subject to the laws of our society, and then what future will I have as one of many? I shall subvert the Hermetic law and aspire to usurp the High Grand Council. My will shall then become the new law of alchemy. These are the thoughts of his heart, fellow counselors, and it is only by the grace of the Trismegistus that his plotting was uncovered before it could ruin our gentle fellowship. Were the accused but a misguided wrongdoer, we might acquit, for one who falls victim to their own misunderstandings is a greater danger to themselves than to this council, and rehabilitation is possible through some thoughtful re-education. But this one is no errant wrongdoer, but a heretic, a dark alchemist, who uses his great gifts willingly to corrupt our ways and threaten our counsel. The foolish novice is a threat to themselves. The heretical dark alchemist is a threat to everything we hold dear. Indeed, lesser offenders offend through ignorance, but none can look upon the works of this one and say they were unintentional. There is no accident in corrupting the practices of alchemy, in releasing carnivorous goats, in superseding our most venerable methodologies of transmutation. That this one achieved Chrysopoeia is acknowledged, but he attained it through unsanctioned means, and always his intent was to usurp, and his willfulness, his derelict desire, is the basis for his condemnation. We forgive those who go astray, but we must condemn those who rebel. There are some among our number who might feel sympathy for the accused, perhaps even some on this council. Will any of them advocate for mercy? Perhaps some will. But you must remember, when they come speaking of his achievements, presenting them as contributions to our pursuit of knowledge and immortality, that he has only pursued the violation of our ways. Would you vote to spare the feelings of his disciples before you vote to preserve our highest procedures and principles? The bylaws of this council demand the celebration of our prodigies. They must also then demand the condemnation of our most corrupted and corrupting protégés. Simple justice demands that punishment must be equal to the crime. For the heresy of attempting to overthrow our creeds, our way of life, and the authority of the High Grand Council and its Grand High Counselor, this one must be banished, must become caput mortuum. The exile of this caput mortuum will benefit us all, for it will allow the preservation of our authority and the stability of our society. And it is possible. We do not need to rely on dark arts and deception to achieve our noble purposes as he has done. We need only to authorize the Grand High Counselor to exercise his immeasurable power in leading the council in stripping this caput mortuum of his immortal essence and imprisoning it semi-eternally in that bleak stasis reserved for only the most heinous of offenders. Indeed, I see it in your eyes, fellow counselors, that you would vote to authorize me to undertake this grim and unfortunate duty for the sake of us all. Perceiving your unanimity, I accept this heavy burden. We shall forego further testimony and deny the accused their inadequate defense and carry out this heart-rending task. Thus he shall be forever known as caput mortuum, the worthless cast-offs of alchemy's noble processes. Well, wow, that sounds an awful lot like the Grand Counselor was kind of just plagiarizing Apthonius the Sophist. I mean, yeah, he changed some things around, but that's the speech we just looked at.
Do you comprehend my ire now? Condemn me for nothing more than being smarter than you if you must, but at least have the decency to write your own speech. Oh, they'll get what's coming to them. You can be sure of it.
You're not going to do anything rash, are you?
Rash? I've been plotting for thousands of years. There's nothing rash about that. Nothing at all. You just keep doing your little writing lessons, and I'll do what the council has forced me to do.
Okay, well, friends, maybe it wasn't such a good idea to fuel his anger, but at the very least, I hope you get some useful writing exercises out of it. That is, after all, what the Progymnasmata is all about. Elemental exercises in rhetoric designed to train writers in rhetorical excellence. So go have some fun vilifying your villains, and we'll see you next week when hopefully the temperatures come down at least a little.
It won't!
Bye.